are. Hey, everybody. Hey. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today as we really begin to take apart what happened in this election. It's important for us to do that. Whenever you win, whenever you don't win, it's important for you to examine what you did well and where you can improve, or what you didn't do well. No less, none other than MC Hammer would sit down with his whole team. And for those of us of a certain age, Alex, you would miss this. He had the most exciting stage show that we saw in rap and hip hop. I mean, if you can imagine scores of people dancing on stage in unison, it was just something fantastic. But what he would do with after each show, he would gather all of the dancers and the entire band, and they had to watch the whole performance immediately after the show. That is how they got to be so good, so great. And you got to find out what happened. So let's talk about what happened. In 2016, it sounds eerily prescient. The Roots Action, which gave us this wonderful study, Norman Solomon and Jeff Cohen, they said, you know what, the party is beginning to see a drift that's moving toward a hemorrhaging of Black support, of youth support, of people in the LGBTQ plus community. Their base is leaving. At the same time, they're looking to gather and pull in this so-called Republican who has left and who is not going to come back. And as we were talking in the last hour, Ariel Gold and Alex Nelson, Ariel Gold, Fellowship of Reconciliation, Alex Nelson, if not now Chicago, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, Make Some Noise for Change. And of course, she is a community psychologist and attorney, Mark Fancher. This was the same fight we had with the Democratic Party in 1984, 1988, when Reverend Jackson ran. Now imagine this. It has now been established that no one has registered more voters in the history of the Republic than Reverend Jesse Jackson. That was true then, and it's even more true today. And they pushed back against that. Their answer was to come up with the Democratic Leadership Council to bury all of these new voters. Who does that? Who continues to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory? Well, the Democrats do that. Why weren't you running with Bernie Sanders? Why did you do town halls with him instead of Liz Cheney? What was going on with the celebrity endorsements, which now we're beginning to see cost millions of dollars, Ariel? These were paid endorsements. It's unbelievable. Let's just keep on going with this. What happened? What happened? And I think it's important for us to understand what happened so that it does not happen again. Because right now, as we're watching the Trump administration come together, I think it's going to make us get to work, which we're going to have to do anyway. But we're really going to have to get to work because, see, now he understands the presidency and how it works. He didn't know it when he came in 8 years ago. But now he really understands it, and he's moving purposefully and with a great deal of purpose and purposefully, as well he ought. But what is that going to mean for us, really? What is that going to mean for the progressive agenda? What is that going to mean for just working people who voted for him in such tremendous numbers? And what does the Democratic Party want anyway? Because now the Republicans are the voice of the working class, Ariel, and of the downtrodden, of the people who want a break, who are mad as hell, as the movie network said, who can't take it anymore. And the Democrats have become the party of the elites, of the Ivy Leaguers, of the people who went to college, of the people who are part of sororities, and on and on and on and on. I get it. But it didn't land well with most of the constituents. In New York alone, Ariel and Alex, Dr. Latrice and attorney Mark Fancher, 900,000 fewer Democrats voted That's almost 1 million Democrats chose not to vote in this election. Whoa, what is happening? Meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I need you to like and subscribe there. Please share the show, Kenneth and Yvonne and Lamont, with somebody. And please also go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. I need you to become my friend there and share the show. We're on X at Santita J and the Santita Jackson Show. So let's go. Hey, Lamont. Hey, Kenneth. Hey, Yvonne. Facebook's having an issue, so Yvonne's showing up as Facebook user, but I know it's you, girl. Hey, Robert. Shalom, my dear brother. And what did you say? Can you speak to the vitriol that your father received from other blacks within the party and what we currently see other blacks attacking one another for their voting choice? Oh, look, Reverend Jackson was not the choice of the elites. I think you can speak to that, Mark. Reverend Jackson was the people's draft. When he ran in 1983, we were pushing back against the Democratic Party because they came in and insulted us. We were finally in the position to get a black mayor who was going to be in the progressive column, Harold Washington. We asked the presumptive nominee, Vice President Mondale, and Ted Kennedy, the iconic liberal in the party, please do not come in and support the two Democratic candidates. We are the most loyal base. You're going to need us in the fall of 84, and you're going to need us in the spring. So we're not just asking you, we are demanding that you not come. They came anyway, Mark. Ariel, you remember that, Ariel? And you remember that, Dr. Latrice. Alex, you'll read about it in the books, but I promise you to see it. Given our rising consciousness, it was such an insult. And Reverend Jackson and Marion Barry and Mayor Richard Hatcher from Gary, Indiana, and some other black folks of consciousness said, no, you can't do this. You can't do this and expect my vote. Now, that's not going to work. And so what Reverend Jackson then did, he went to Andrew Young and to Maynard Jackson. And Maynard Jackson really gave us a new South. First black mayor of Atlanta, extremely progressive. And he wanted them to run. Mayor Jackson had just gotten remarried and he just had a baby. He said, I can't do it. Great idea. Can't do it. And Uncle Andy, bless his heart, thought it was another harebrained scheme by Reverend Jackson. He's a little bit more conservative than my father is. But while he was making the case for it, the people, as you recall, Mark, started saying, run, Jesse, run. And that's what happened. But Reverend was never the choice of the in crowd. And that never bothered us because he didn't, they ended up benefiting from his work always. But my father he says, if you need thanks, you don't deserve it. So this was about lifting the boat stuck at the bottom, and that's what we did. And that's enough. So I hope that helps you out, Lamont. So let's get to this. You know what? I'm gonna lead with you, Ariel Gold, because as we look at this autopsy, and I'm glad that you asked me about the history, because that kind of sort of is where we are, because Reverend did not get support of the Democratic Party when he ran. As he was building it, as he was registering more people to vote than they had ever seen before in the history of the party, in the history of electoral politics. They tried to shut him down. And at the end of his historic run, they changed the rules so to try to prohibit him from running in 88 and to make it significantly harder. They came up with something called Super Tuesday, which was designed to kick him out a couple of months into the process. It turns out that the DLC, which was a right-wing group in the party, Bill Clinton, Sam Nunn, Al Gore, and the like. It turns out Al Gore, who was their candidate, Reverend ended up defeating in Super Tuesday. You can't make this stuff up. But Ariel Gold, 900,000 fewer New Yorkers, Democratic New Yorkers voted in 2024. And in the Electoral College, look, we were just pulverized. And the Electoral College shows you, even though some states are winner take all, they're not all winner take all. Some states really you have to win congressional districts. And so that kind of showed you that there were a lot of, when you step back and look at the map that is almost completely red, if you think about it every day, Trump was someplace that you've never heard of before. Yeah, he did do that. You cannot say that the man did not work, and did not see and touch some of everybody.
He even made French fries.
Well, he did. Well, you know what? Yeah.
No, I mean that. I mean that though, actually.
Well, okay, he made fries. Okay.
No, but he
No, he
related
did.
to the people. That's the part that actually matters.
I know, and got in the truck. You know, the garbage truck, right? So it's like he did that.
He did.
So what about what about losing in 2016? Roots Action noted you're losing Black people. You're losing working class people. You're losing young people. You're losing you, and nothing was done about that.
You know, I was just thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking about these autopsies that we're doing, right? And, you know, what I was thinking about was we needed an autopsy in 2020 because we declared that we just won, or the Democrats won, because we're amazing and everybody likes us and the Obama coalition is still intact and everybody loves Biden. But that wasn't my take for why we won 2020. My take for why Biden won in 2020 were a couple of factors. It was the middle of a pandemic. People were at home, right? They were isolated at home. It made voting in a different way more accessible, right? People weren't going about their daily lives. And there was a lot of stress and angst on people's minds. And so that call, it wasn't for Biden, but that call to defeat Trump resonated. And the Democrats went into 2024 as though they could just replicate that, as though that were the same thing, as though we're in the same situation. And we're not. And Harris campaign did not give us something to vote for, right? Her economic policy, if you could even figure out what it was, it wasn't much. Whereas, yeah, Trump went into McDonald's and he rode around in a garbage truck. And what that really says to people is, I see you. I know you're having a hard time. I know that you're living hand to mouth and you're not garbage to me.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. And we're not in the pandemic anymore, right? This is a different time. And we didn't make these really necessary changes to, you know, see where our votes are failing and who might not turn out this time.
Ariel, stop right there. But you made me think about something that I hadn't really thought about this, and I know Dr. Latrice is going to want to have something to say, but I'm going to have to let Alex go shortly, so I'm going to pivot to her very shortly. But I'm speaking. I said, oh no, this is not what you say to people. Oh gosh. I understood what she was saying because she was raised to be a lady and, and to be appropriate. I get that.
Me too. And she wanted to come off as a strong woman in that moment.
Yeah.
But it did not land that way.
No. So, but stay right there because Alex, because there's a generational thing here too with you. Mm-hmm. And because I noticed when we were at the Rainbow Push in our Saturday morning forum on Sunday, and I spoke with you about this too, Ariel.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing, people are just now doing these autopsies because quite frankly, people did not expect her to lose. They didn't. And we looked up and I was surprised that the young people were so taken aback by the celebrity endorsements. And now we're seeing that the celebrity endorsements were really $1 million paid endorsements. And there was, and she couldn't figure out what to say with Gaza. And now we're seeing that the Israeli government is preparing to overtake the West Bank. In anticipation. What do you make of what happened? I don't even know what to say.
So I think that there's a lot going on, but I will say I have been on your show many, many times, Santita, and I said over and over again, the biggest threat is not Democrats losing voters to Donald Trump. It is Democrats losing voters to the couch. And that wasn't 100% correct. We did see some folks on the margins flip over, but the much, much bigger story is the Democrats that stayed home. And that's not just in the swing battleground states. We talked about losing the blue wall and the flip back of Georgia and North Carolina, but also, she lost a lot of support in urban cores. I'm in Chicago. She lost a lot of support here. She lost a lot of support in New York City and Los Angeles. These are places where people are voting, have the ability to vote their conscience because they know that the Electoral College, frankly, disenfranchises us from voting at the presidential level. And I think that's where, that's where the loss of the popular vote, at the very least, comes into play. And I don't want to say it's just Gaza. We know from the exit polling that folks said at the polls, economy. But what I think it is Gaza is this cloud where people see that their lives are not improving. They don't have, we don't have Medicare for all. We don't have a civilian climate corps. We don't have all of we didn't tax the rich. We didn't prosecute Trump. Merrick Garland absolutely failed at his job. He should have been prosecuting Donald Trump day one of the Biden administration. And so, you have this thing, we can't provide all these things. We don't have the money. But at the same time, they see they see the Democratic establishment sending bombs to Israel, signing off on multi-billion-dollar aid packages to Israel, weapons packages to Israel. And it creates this narrative of like, well, yeah, it's the economy, but it's that you're choosing to send funds overseas. In particular, you're sending funds overseas to murder children, and I'm not seeing that in my own pocketbook. So it's the economy, but it's the economy in context. People aren't saying that in a vacuum. I don't know if she would have won the election if she'd called for an arms embargo, but done everything else the same. But I really believe that hindered her support with her most enthusiastic base with young people. I'm not quite Gen Z. I am a true millennial, right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But I work at a college and I work with a ton of young students, and the ones that are very engaged and very attuned to sort of these global inequities. And they've always grown up in the era of a democratic state that's sort of falling apart at the seams, and a Democratic Party that won't stand up to it. So I just think that there's an element of nihilism, of we've been dealt the worst hand, so why does it matter anyways? I think it's really devastating, and I just, I wish that the Biden administration had done a million things differently to make sure that Trump was not able to run for office again. If you believe he's a fascist, if you believe he staged a coup, you should have acted on that. And I think that the Harris campaign really dropped the ball in listening to their core base and their core voters and making sure that their base was enthusiastic and ready to get out to the polls.
Roots Action, before you go, 2 years ago, asked President Biden to stand by his promise to be a transitional president and have a term. And don't run Joe, that campaign, step aside Joe. And now we're seeing a lot of finger pointing, as everybody is doing their autopsy. And they're doing it on television, but they're also doing it very much behind the scenes. And some people are saying that, she was addled by the fact that he did not leave early enough. In addition to the trouble that she had with really sharpening her message, I guess, in her intention. I don't know. There was just a lot, in 107 days, she was just trying to figure a lot of things out. I don't want to make excuses for anyone. Because if this is what you've been given, this is what you've been given. You got to make it work. So, what do you think about, is there anything you think she could have done differently, just given, and the president did move out of the way, except for one or two gaffes, which I think cost her. And I think that the gaffe with Black men and President Obama, it wasn't a gaffe. His manner with Black men was a turn off, and a lot of people reacted to that. I mean, there's something called a quiet riot.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of sort of think that's what you heard and saw. I mean, what do you make of all of this? Because there was a lot of discontent out here on the ground. And I think you saw it manifested last Tuesday with who didn't vote, with between Jill Stein and Robert Kennedy, they got like 1.35 million votes. They got like 675,000 plus votes apiece. That's not insignificant when you're trying to win. Some people actually went to the poll and intended to not vote for her. The people who went to the polls to vote for Trump intended to vote for him.
Mm-hmm.
Some people intended not to vote for her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important to note. That's just my read on it. Your thoughts?
I think that's 100% correct, Reed, because we saw that Jackie Rosen won in Nevada, Ruben Gallego run in Arizona, Tammy Baldwin held onto her seat in Wisconsin, and Alyssa Slotkin won in Michigan. Mm-hmm. So it's not that the battleground game wasn't there. It's not that they weren't doing the work of knocking the doors and calling the voters. It is that there was, for lack of a better term, like people wanted to punish the top of the ticket and the Biden administration for, whether it's that their cost of living is just obscene, whether it is our foreign policy and the fact that the Democratic Party comes off as war hawks, whether it's just a sense of resentment towards, the fact that the status quo is continuing to hold. But,
wait a minute, Alex, hold on. Mm-hmm. Comes off as war hawks. They campaigned with one. They didn't.
Yeah, she said the most lethal military in the world.
She didn't campaign with Bernie. She ran around with Liz Cheney, who voted with Trump 90% of the time. You're frightening me with Project 2025. She supports Project 2025.
And she couldn't get herself elected, Liz Cheney. In what world, right?
Yeah. Hello?
Do we think that Liz Cheney was going to win the election when Liz Cheney couldn't even hold on to her own seats?
Yeah. So I think it's just mass disillusionment with the Democratic Party. And I think I think the fact that we didn't lose those Senate seats, or the Democrats did not lose those Senate seats, indicates that there was just a real disconnect with the way that people feel about. And I'm excited to see if there ever is an audit of write-in votes and votes for top of the ticket, left blank, but all down ballots. I'm hoping that we get to see those numbers someday. I don't know if we ever will, but it would be great to see where the drop-offs happen, because I think that will deeply inform where the electorate is and where people's heads and hearts are.
Alex Nelson, if not now, is there anything you'd like to say before you go? I'm trying to be respectful of your time because I certainly want you to come back.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Santita. And I just say, hold your families and your communities close, because I think we are going to need our solidarity and the people around us and with us more than ever. So
yeah, well, that can be a good thing. That can be a good thing. In fact, it is a good thing. How about that? Alex Nelson, if not now, Chicago, sending you so much love. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Santita.
Always. Dr. LaShawn Latrice. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. As you were looking at the election, the oncoming election, then you were the flashing light. You said, look, I see trouble ahead, you all. This is not going to be what you think it is, because there's a buzz I'm not hearing on the ground. And there's discontent that I hear. Talk to me.
It appeared
give us your autopsy, doctor.
It appeared to me that over that time frame that we were talking, over a few months when we were talking, it appeared that people were having conversations that they were feeling like they were being intentionally left out of the conversation. And it kind of peaked at the DNC being here in Chicago. What it looked like was the Democratic Party had failed miserably in including those disenfranchised groups of people. Like, there were certain communities that were just completely overlooked in the entire process. And so when you heard the conversations ruffling around the men, Black men, the women, homeless people. People had certain issues they were concerned about, but they were never discussed. And they felt like there was an intentional thing to overlook it. And no matter how many times I heard it brought up in several different arenas, you haven't talked about poverty, you haven't talked about the cost of living, the economy, you haven't talked about what's happening with the homeless population, you haven't addressed the migrant crisis. All these things were just steadily rising, and it came all the way to the top, and nobody ever really just zeroed in on those conversations. We talked about the lack of investment in the Black and brown communities as far as the investment in letting people know what their options were, talking about the candidates, talking about who she was. None of that was really done. And so what I saw was a culmination of, I thought it was an intentional sabotage. I kept saying, this seems like an indirect hit where it was not a fair shot from the beginning, because even I was saying all the way up to the election day, I still don't know who she is. Do you know how many people were saying the exact same thing? People felt like, okay, Trump is this, Trump is that. They said all these things about him. They weren't saying they were going to vote for him. They were saying, well, you know what you're getting when you hear Trump. He's been the same. He never stopped campaigning. He left the office, and for 4 years, he kept himself relevant. But here we had a person who had been thrust up into the seat running for the presidential race, and nobody really could tell authentically who she was. And I think that hurt the campaign more than anything. And I just said, for me, I just felt like I did not really know who I was getting from one conversation to the next. And that resonated with so many different people that I spoke to.
So when you say people did not know who she was, I mean, what? I mean, what were they looking for? What were they looking for her to say? When you say they didn't know who she was, you know where she went to school, you know her name, you know her parents. Is it that they didn't know her positions? What was it? What didn't they know?
I think people knew that she was that she went to school at Howard. I think people knew she was a part of Divine Nine. I think that was one of the most notable achievements that everybody kept saying. But I think when it was talking about speaking to her record or her job that she done as a prosecutor, she never talked about that. And there was, whether there were true statements and there were false statements, there was never any conversation that spoke to those things. So now you have that entire situation just unaddressed, not to mention the war. When it came down to the war, we were talking about the war in Gaza. We talked about Haiti. We talked about a number of different things, but you never heard them talk about that at all when it came to her being questioned. Even when she was posed with certain questions, she danced around the answers. And then people felt like, okay, that's not authentic. You're not really saying anything towards what we're asking. You're talking around it. And I think when it comes to stuff like that, people feel like you're playing with them, like you're playing with their integrity, their mind. They can't possibly phantom that they don't understand that you're not answering the question directly. And to me, that's an insult. I think it's a slap in the face. And I think when we watched the presidential debate, that was another thing that I thought hurt her campaign, because I didn't see much of a debate. I didn't see much of the core issues being discussed. And I just heard a lot of people rallying behind her just because they were part of the Divine Nine and they thought she did good. And, I was still sitting there going, okay, did anybody talk about anything that was relevant to the U.S.? I didn't see that at all.
Attorney Mark Fancher.
Well, I think that if a person is going to conduct an autopsy or post-mortem analysis, the implication is that they really give a hoot, and I don't. I am not at all happy that we have Trump as president, but I am quite delighted that the Democratic Party is in trouble, because I hope it collapses. I hope the Republican Party collapses. I think that both of them are two sides of the same coin, one party with two names. They all serve the same masters. And the idea that they can somehow be reformed, that they can somehow be remade into something that is going to truly address the needs of humanity is a vain hope. To engage in that is folly. It's a waste of energy and a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. But that having been said, I do think that for purposes of what I do hope happens, it's necessary to engage in some level of analysis. And from my perspective, there are two analyses that have to be made. One is, why did people abandon the Democratic Party? And I think that the issue of why many of them voted for Trump is a separate question, a separate analysis. And when we look at why they abandoned it, it's for many of the reasons that everybody has identified during this program. But I think that ultimately it has not been what I think Reverend Jackson was trying to make it. At least, to the extent that he could when he was campaigning. Reverend Jackson, during his campaign, particularly in '84, threw all of the manuals away in terms of how you're supposed to conduct a political campaign and how you're supposed to succeed within the framework of the U.S. electoral system. Whenever one of the things that the manual says is that when you're in trouble as a party, then you need to move to the center. You need to move to the right. That was never within Reverend Jackson's contemplation as far as I could see. I mean, I wasn't up close and personal with that campaign, but what I saw was a movement masquerading as a campaign.
Well, no,
What I saw
there's that. That's true.
what I saw was a freedom fighter who was crisscrossing the country, talking to coal miners, talking to farmers, going into the barrios and talking to people who were downtrodden and oppressed, going into urban areas, the Mississippi Delta, Appalachia, and all of these places where the people who were most oppressed, most marginalized, most harassed, and beaten down by the system lived. I saw someone who went to places where he dare not go. He went to Cuba and raised the hand of Fidel Castro. He went to Nicaragua when the Sandinistas were in power and were believed to be the enemy of the U.S., and he was greeted as a conquering hero. He was someone who made common cause with the rights of Palestinians. That's very different from anything that anybody who is engaged in Democratic Party politics even contemplates. And you see the results. He had a limited window of opportunity to do what he did, but in the process, he exceeded all expectations. It is my belief that he was able to succeed to the extent that he did because nobody expected that he was going to have as much success, that his message was going to resonate in the way that it did. And I think that when they saw that it did, then they freaked out because what he was doing, he was breaking out of the paradigm that we've been given, the political paradigm that this country has been given, which is that you have one party with two names and you play a little game to see who it is that's going to serve their time in the White House, and then you let somebody else do it. And all the while, whoever is there is serving the interest of capital, is serving the interest of empire, is serving the interest of the military-industrial complex. And the Democratic Party is not built to do anything but that. And so I think that we need to retreat from it and abandon it. And so I'm on some level thrilled that people on an intuitive level understood that about the Democratic Party and bolted, left it alone, as they should. The question of why and the wisdom of going to Donald Trump is a separate question. But before we get there, I think that where I would hope that people would go ultimately is to where Reverend Jackson was. I think that the true strength and the true power of people who are powerless lies in global unity of the oppressed. That we're not limited to the paradigm that we've been given in the United States, where so many are regarded as minority groups. They're regarded as minority groups only because they've been balkanized, they've been divided, they've been splintered from other people who may ethnically or racially be different, but whose interests are very, very similar, and that they should be in alliance with each other. And when they're in alliance, then they constitute a majority. When they ally themselves with people who are oppressed around the world, particularly in the global South, they become an unstoppable force. And I think that it's that level, that's where the energy, in my opinion, should be, rather than spending a lot of time picking through the bones of a dead party with dead ideas.
Well, let me see. KR says it needs reform. We also need more party options because the two-party system is causing too much division in the nation. George Washington, Ariel, I see you shaking your head. He said a two-party system is not a good thing.
There are some checks and balances within the corrupt democratic machine, right? And one of those is the primaries. And Dr. Zogby, they called it the Zogby plan. He begged the DNC when Biden stepped aside, do a fast primary. Do a fast primary.
I remember that.
And what that would have flushed out is where people were excited, where they weren't excited, what their most important issues were, and whether she was the best candidate. And, I thought she was a great candidate. Honestly, when he stepped aside, I kind of liked her in some ways. But I think part of that issue was, Biden's approval rating was so low. So the incumbent administration was impossible. The incumbent administration was vastly disliked, and Harris didn't distance herself. And a primary would have told us that if she was the candidate, that she needed to distance herself on a number of issues from Biden, from the administration. But we didn't do that. We plowed ahead with Cheney and a big party at the DNC, rather than and where we're talking about knowing Harris. Yes, we know about her, but where you get to meet somebody is in those small towns, in those small group, those small settings that kind of more, get to know somebody. And instead we were just giant arenas, and we needed both.
I mean, you have to see and touch people. But I'm telling you, I was stunned as I was talking to young people at our Saturday morning forum, and as I've been talking to young people. They were turned off by Liz Cheney, Attorney Fancher, Ariel Gold, Dr. Latrice. I mean, I'm surprised because they missed Iraq. These 20 and 23-year-olds, they missed it, and 25-year-olds, but they said, Liz Cheney, are you serious? Then they were angered by the celebrity endorsements. And now the story is coming out, Dr. Latrice, please speak to that. Now the story is coming out, Ariel and Mark Fancher, that these were $1 million endorsements. And I think 50 Cent let the cat out the bag. He said that someone asked him that he was offered $3 million for an endorsement. And Donald Trump Jr. said someone came to us with a $3 million offer. And we said, we don't pay. I said, so he might not have been offered $3 million, but he was offered a lot of money to appear. And he said, okay, if this is transactional, not a problem. Let me go to them and say, I'm just speculating now. But I thought that was very interesting that he put that out there. And he throws a lot of stuff out there. But when we see that so much money was paid, and I've heard everybody here say, wait a minute, there are community leaders. You could have put this money not just in with them, you could have paid young people and older people and people who had time to go knock on these doors and the phone bank and all of that.
Yes.
And because that did not work. It did not work. I mean, because so much, it's not even a leak. It's like a dam is breaking. So much stuff is coming out about the campaign now. It's not even been a week that I'm like, whew. Generally they kind of hold on to things and write a book. No. Folks just writing articles and they're putting this stuff on Twitter. Dr. Latrice.
You were right about people being offended about the celebrity endorsements.
Why were they offended?
I just think people felt like that was almost beneath us. It was like not giving us the level of intelligence that we have to throw a celebrity in front of us and think that that was going to catch our attention. Number one, first of all, we don't rely on celebrities to give us any sort of direction or advice. And the average person doesn't even look to them to even be serious enough to take, in consideration what they would suggest for a candidate for president anyway. But on the flip side of that, it also speaks to you believing that a certain mentality exists, that if you do these things, it's almost like a stereotype that is the thing that will catch people's attention when you're not really thinking, A, who you're putting in front of people, B, what that person or individual represents away from you, and C, the level of the target that you're seeking to try to address. So, you have people from all different walks of life, all different types of income, but many people don't zero in on the top name celebrity to say, oh, so-and-so is endorsing. So I asked a few people, who were in support of her campaign. And I said, so what do you think the purpose of utilizing those celebrity people were for? The number one reason I got was they want their followers. They wanted the people's followers. And so I thought about it and I said, oh, so they put them in front of it in hopes of them promoting them and then collecting their millions of followers. But it just doesn't work like that in the world of politics, because now you're trying to mix politics with entertainment. And the level of expertise in politics or what people are looking for doesn't equate to the same thing that people are looking for when they're looking for a celebrity to follow. So I think they missed the mark on that. And I don't know what kind of advice was given by the campaign strategist to do that, but it just wasn't a smart move at all. I know it cost a lot of money. That's the first thing I could think of. And I think, how dare you not go to our communities, but you would go to these celebrities? I mean, come on now. They're just literally one individual. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but so-and-so's got this many followers. I mean, I hear it all the time. I'm like, but I think I get the sense that people are, first of all, the plurality of Americans now are not even Democrats or Republicans. The plurality are independent. People are clearly looking for something else. And you know what? We might be uncomfortable with a third party. And quite frankly, I am not. I'm very comfortable with a third and a fourth and a fifth, because I love watching Q&A at the British Parliament. I think it's great to see them fighting it out and all these different parties, and then having to come up with coalition governments because everybody's got a piece. To me, that makes more sense. Okay. And it lessens the resentment. When you have a winner take all system, that is dangerous. That's dangerous, because then people feel like, well, then I've lost and you've won. If people continue to come up on the losing end, or come up on the losing end of something that means a whole lot to them, they resent you. That's not smart. Honey, I'm from a family of 5 kids. Sometimes each one of us could have been wrong. But our parents had to figure out. I was talking to my mother and father. They said, no, your mother and I, my father said, your mother and I worked out a way. We were not going to reward you when you were wrong. But we knew we had to manage, because we couldn't put our thumbs on the scales with you all, because, as my father said to me, my brother Jesse and I used to get into it all the time. My father would kind of take up for me. After a point, he said, enough. I was about 13 or so. He said, there's something in you that's in him, and there's something that's in him that's in you. You all need to work this out. He said, so Daddy's not going to get in this anymore, Mark. He said, nah. And you know better. So I expect you to do better and be better. Love you. Got a kiss. That was it. But, I felt looking back, that was a very enlightened way of looking at things. But I had to start looking at myself. And Mark, I'm just saying, I see us missing the mark on a whole lot. No pun intended. My brother. Does that sound familiar? Oh, gosh. That's another thing. I think that no one really wants to look at the elephant in the room. Liz Cheney, that was like, that did not play well. I don't know I think that the breach that existed between Kamala Harris and black men and black people over her prosecutorial record, what happened with Barack Obama made things infinitely worse, and no one talked about it. No one wanted to talk about it. I'm like, y'all, you got to talk about it because he needs to be pressured to say something so that she can help get her out that hole. And I would hear from people, well, constitutionally, he's not, he is not even constructed to apologize. I said, if he wants her to win, he's better. But if he wants her to lose, keep it up. I'm looking at YouTube. I'm looking at these folks. However, they're sitting up here and they are tearing him up in these interviews. They're tearing her up on her prosecutorial record, Mark Fancher, and it's like no one heard anything.
Yeah. I don't know that it's just that. I think that people make reference to it, but I think there's something else that's ongoing within the Black community in this country, and that is that there is a growing sense that there is a Black elite. That there are these people who are tied into the system, who profit from it a great deal, and who depend on people who are powerless, the grassroots, the people who are down and poor and in the streets, to keep them in those positions.
Absolutely.
And they don't pay any attention to these people who put them into these positions. They're ashamed of them, or at least that's the perception. They don't want them around because they just sort of mess up the landscape. But they do come around every few years asking them to come and vote. And then when there is a lack of enthusiasm, then they fuss at them and talk about how irresponsible they are because they don't register, they don't vote. And they hear these endless lectures about if we want to change things, we've got to vote. Well, why? So that you can continue to go to your cocktail parties and go to your fancy organizational club meetings, and you can continue to have fancy titles and have everybody speak to you while we're down here suffering and dealing with police violence, and while our kids are still getting dragged off and imprisoned for years and years and years, and while we're still having trouble trying to make ends meet, and you're up here talking about that and coming around here asking us to give you a vote. Who are you? And look, I'm gonna get real. I mean, with Kamala Harris, she it may have been beneficial in many communities for her to have transcended race in many ways. But when the average brother and sister see this Black woman with her white husband, who is removed in so many ways from their daily experience, it's really hard to relate and feel emotionally that this is somebody I got to get behind. So I think that there is a class issue that's very much present within the Black community. And then you have Barack Obama come around and basically throw gasoline on an already smoldering fire when he makes the comments that he makes. Because I've said it before, it's not that he just preached to Black men, but he was so wrong substantively in what he was saying to them. Basically, what he was saying to them is that you're not willing to follow the leadership of Black women. But has this man never heard of Nzinga in Angola, who commanded large numbers of Black men in wars against the Portuguese? Has he not heard of Ella Baker, who founded SNCC and who commanded the respect of Black men? Has he not heard of Assata Shakur, who Black men who were members of the Black Liberation Army referred to as the General, and who took orders from her with great pride? Have they not heard of Elaine Brown, who was the chair of the Black Panther Party for a period? Have they not heard of, we could go on and on about the number of Black women who have been actively engaged in political leadership of our community and who Black men have followed with great loyalty and with great love. I mean, how dare anybody cross or say anything wrong about Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean,
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet.
What?
I mean,
Rosa Parks. What?
yeah. I mean, we could go on and on. And so, for him to say that, I mean, betrays his it's I don't even know how to characterize it, but you got that dynamic, and you can't lead the people. You can't be somebody who moves the people if you're not in and among the people. And I think that this elite class of Black people, has no expectation or hope that they're going to obtain the allegiance of people who really matter.
And and Dr. King was from the Black elite, but he was not of them.
Oh, he was a man of the people. He was down on the ground.
And that is where he went, even though he was what you would call a Black Brahmin. He came from the Black elite, but that's not where his heart was, and people understood that. And his people, his generals, were all very well educated men and women who could have had very comfortable lives. But guess what? That's not where their hearts were. But those are the leaders that we send and who we ascend. The leaders who are sent to us, well, this is what we've got now. It's a difference between those whom we send to the power structure and those whom the power structure sends to us.
And I don't want to be misunderstood. It is not that people don't want to see individual Black people succeed. In fact, there's great pride when people ascend to high office. There was great pride when Barack Obama became the president of the United States. But there is also an expectation that once you get there, you're going to reach back and help us to be better too. That you're not going to just turn your back on us and just leave us out in the cold and pretend like you're ashamed of us. And so there is great pride in progress of individuals, as long as there is an organic relationship, a loving relationship, one of reaching back and supporting and helping. And that's been missing.
Yeah, and don't make this about you, me. Make it about we. That's where that has to be. I mean, I just closing
That's
thoughts.
What Trump got right. That's what Trump got right with the McDonald's and the garbage truck, and those are just the easy examples, right? But that's what he got right. And the former Republican Party, before it was taken over by Trump, there used to be talk about it fading out of relevancy and like losing because people couldn't relate to it, and it was too elite and too corporate machine. And Trump took it over, like clearly, and has revitalized it into an entirely different thing. Now the Democrats are trying to say, like, oh, we'll take your leftovers. We'll take what nobody wanted in the first place. We'll be the elite, up in our high area and not connect with the people. And, people wanted to hear inflation sucks. They did not want to hear this complicated, like, well, we did this and the Biden did this and this. People are like, no, I cannot afford my groceries. And they want to hear that and know that. And they want, like, how are you going to help me afford my groceries and be angry with me that I can't afford my groceries?
I didn't hear her mention price gouging at all in her speeches. I'm like, honey, and connect that to, I can't afford the groceries. I know you can. I know it's hard out here. I know it's hard. But, but don't make it about the me. Make it about the we. And, when you listen to all of these consultants from Washington and New York and California, because that's where they're from the media centers and where the money is. And that's a formula for losing. Dr. Sean Latrice, you got the final word here.
I just hope that that everyone pays attention to what has happened thus far, and that when we think about getting people engaged in something like this, we got to pay attention to what the people are really asking for, what they need, what they're looking for, and also the heart of the people, the heart of the issues that are impacting the people. I do not think the resolution will come through a Democrat or Republican Party. I do think those two things together are a very, very sad determinant of turning people away from the electoral process. I also think that we need to still address the structural racism that is in place that makes people think that no matter what they say or do or how they move, their vote doesn't count anyway. That's why when we think about how we've been let down by these parties, we have to pay attention to the change that needs to come by people actually just kind of turning away from the process like they've done thus far.
Well, rise to the language of the unheard. See, as people are not just turning away, they're turning to, but to what we do not know. But the people will be heard. They will be.
Yes.
And let's be very clear on that. And thank you, Mark, because we did see the class divide in the Black community. That is real. That is very, very real. We talked about this many times. I'm like, hey, I went to a Black college, Divine Nine, all of that. And Reverend Jackson did too. But he didn't, he campaigned in a way that made people feel included. And I go back to him because he really still is a sterling example for us on that. Like Dr. King is a sterling example. I mean, these people really, there are sterling examples for getting civil rights, getting our rights affirmed in this system, or creating a system that's going to work for us. They're the ones who fought for that, and they're the ones who are still fighting for that. And we have to get off our wumpty duffs and do that too. And what will benefit Black people, everybody, will benefit everybody. That is the thing. When you ended slavery, everybody was freed in America. You can't have a free America with an enslaved population. When you grant the right to vote to the formerly enslaved, that means your right to vote is just that much more secure. Because be very clear, if you were not a property white man, they didn't want you to have the right to vote and you didn't have it. So let's get clear on that, everybody. So, what did you say? The KR said the talented 10% shrunk to 5% due to neglect. And you can keep on going for that. Kenneth said Black women married to a white man as head of the household could not get the white woman to vote. Now, there's that part too. There's a whole lot that was going on here. And I am as open-minded as they can be because I think love is love is love is love is love. And if that is the person she chose, the person who chose her, I stand 10 toes down for that. That having been said, politics is optics too. And as Black people are struggling to get up, if you're going to do this, that's not going to work. Sorry. What did Denzel Washington do? He refused to kiss white women in his movies. He said, my base are Black women. They will never tolerate that. So I'm sorry, Julia Roberts, I can't kiss you in this movie. We can look at each other with great longing. I ain't kissing you, sis. I ain't going to have these sisters mad with me. He said it. I didn't do that. Okay, that part. He said it. He did. And Black women would have been crunchy. And it's not that Black women don't like white women, but Black women have had our beauty attacked. We've been told that we're not as beautiful as we are, that we're not as smart as we are, that we're not as accomplished as we are. We've been told all that we are not. And that would have just been too much. Okay? So I don't want my white sister to get upset. I just want you to understand that everybody can have a man but me. How about that? And that ain't going to work for us much longer. Like now, that's over. Love you. Second hour of the Santita Jackson Show coming up. Let's dissect what happened last week. With this election. We're going to work it out, everybody. We're going to work it out on the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.